I remember we were more or less deploying customers, and by customers, we're talking anything from schools to universities to ministries of education and even nationwide deployments of Microsoft 365. We were deploying constantly day and night, and we were spinning up new tenants with millions of users every every week or every second week. So it was quite a leap forward, a forced leap forward. Not to say a kick in the rear, but it was a leap forward, and we got that feeling from the market as well, and we see that the overall consensus is that the advancements made during this period where everybody had to refocus, to readapt, to reimagine how education works, again, pretty much overnight, we see that this has translated into a huge technological leap into the market, where people have become more aware, more conscious, more informed on what tools are available out there and how they can use and leverage that for education and not only. So, there's an estimate that says 85% of the educators feel like they have been advancing in those past 2 years for as long as a decade in terms of technology advancements from where they were at the beginning and where they are right now. And of course, with every such change, there's also the change management aspect of things, right? The way you treat this and you manage this change in order to make it effective. And also from feedback from our customers is that there were growing concerns on educators that having been placed in this new context, in this new paradigm, in this new environment, they felt it's kind of hard. They were struggling a bit to keep an elevated engagement and focus throughout the class from their students, right? Because now it's not a teacher standing in front of the class. It's a teacher standing in front of a monitor with squares, and each square maybe has a video feed on, or maybe it doesn't. It just has a photo or a logo. So it's fair to say that this posed and is still posing to a certain extent challenges on how teachers are adapting to using those technologies as efficient as they would do if they were in class teaching live, as they have done for so many times. So with that in mind, there was a challenge. We quickly overcome it, and now it's probably the time, since it's a bit more quiet right now, since online learning, it's not so more present in the region or worldwide, but it's kind of shifting to remote or hybrid learning, to be specific. So we still want to keep that muscle flexed and trained, where we are able to teach to our students and to relay information and courses and resources through digital ways as well. We still want to keep that going because, well, it enhances education. It brings a new perspective and new possibilities to run education as a process. And you never know when you're going to need that again. And it's good to have it up and running and ready when if the next or when the next thing hits. I was hearing, I'm based in Bucharest, Romania, and I was hearing discussions on schools that would want to revert back to online learning during the winter time, just to cut down on expenses on gas and on heating, right? So you never know when you're going to need that. And now it's a kind of a quiet time, more or less, to start preparing for what's coming and to reimagine or transform the way you look at education. And you can see here a couple of concepts that would make for a more adapted, a more enhanced education process, right? It has to be an inclusive education. It has to be accessible to all, regardless of their upbringing, regardless of their location, regardless of their skills or of their abilities, physical abilities or not. We were talking yesterday about accessibility. So one of the key principles when we're talking about reimagining this education and this hybrid learning is we want to make it accessible for all students and all teachers. And we're constantly developing technology and features, as you've seen those 2 days to actually materialize that. We wanted to have the same engagement levels and proactivity from the students as we would have in the class, but we also want to allow them to learn at their own pace and in their own rhythm. So we're talking about synchronous and asynchronous learning, where we just hand out a bunch of materials and we reconvene in a certain time, and each student has the time to disseminate and to assimilate those materials, and then we have a checkup. Or we're talking about synchronous learning, which is more or less the definition of what we're doing right now, which is live, more or less one-way, two-way communication with one-to-many, like a teacher to students. So you have this synchronous and asynchronous contexts or ways of teaching that you want to accommodate. Going further, it has to support in person, it has to support remote as well, so it has to be hybrid. Maybe it's not going to be COVID, it's not going to be the heating, it's probably going to be students that cannot attend certain class for a certain period of time. So then it's always good to have this backup options where you can stream the lessons effortlessly, and then be able to store them and watch them on demand going further. So those are kind of the questions we're asking ourselves, we're posing to ourselves when we're talking about reimagining or transforming education. And should I move further to the next slide, you'll see that there are some answers that we have for this, and there are solutions that actually are able to tap into all those questions and provide a way moving forward. So in terms of flexible education, we know it has to be accessible on any device. We know we need to be able to share a vast amount of data, files, of content without having to worry about limitations or access, or limitations of file sizes or access types or any other such things. We need to be able to provide a unitary point of access to all educational resources, from timetables to educational content to working groups to virtual class sessions. It helps if it's all in one place and it's all accessible through a consolidated unitary identity, as we were talking yesterday about identities and having one single identity to access anything that's related to your education environment. And this also allows us the opportunity to explore a more personalized way of learning, where being so digital about it, being done online with the wealth of tools and AI we have behind those tools, we can see how our lectures are going, how our student sentiment is going. We even have, if we're talking Asia, we even have solutions that are able to depict the sentiment of students, either from their video webcams or either from their text that they're submitting as homework. We have solutions that are able to analyze and tell you the feedback of the student beyond the verbal or the visual feedback that you would normally get from a student. So it has to be flexible, it has to be personalized. We need to look at student insights and adapt along the way, and we need to constantly improve the process. And of course, it has to be inclusive. And we were talking yesterday about those not cookie monsters, the emoticon monsters in Teams. So that was just a nice example of how you can gauge student sentiment, and you can, as an educator, you can get feedback from your students without having to ask for it directly, and kind of assess your ways in this manner. We have those live captions and translations that are also available. This brings for us the opportunity to do shared experiences where we bring a teacher from a different geography, from a different topic, from a different country, and we have this guest speaker session during one of our classes, so on and so forth. Obviously, most of the stuff, or all the stuff that I was mentioning about, is addressable, is doable, has a way of happening through the Microsoft Teams and through the Microsoft 365 apps collaboration stack, right? You get those, and you've seen in the demos, you get those teams, those classes, various ways to engage with them, whether it's chat, whether it's video conferencing, whether it's assignments or quizzes. And you can kickstart the interaction like this and take it to augment the education process by using those technologies. Some other tools that are very interesting to deploy in an education environment, tools such as OneNote Plus Notebooks, which is basically a spin-off of the OneNote application that you probably are familiar with. This one is actually a dedicated education version of OneNote, where you can actually see it's hosted within Teams. So that means it's accessible very easily on the single set of identities you were talking about. And if you take a look, you can see that you can structure under a class themes. In this case, the international relations, you can actually structure a lot of content in various forms or formats, and you can relay that to students. And it's all there inside of Teams, where they have everything else at their disposal. Going one step further, talking about the hybrid education and the wealth of resources, and I'm not going to get too deep into this because this will follow up after the lunch break, is the Power Suite, where we can actually either create from scratch or from templates, and there's a wealth of templates out there. You can create applications within the Microsoft 365 ecosystem to further connect and integrate the environment. So for example, you would like an app that is able to get intake requests from students on various papers or documents that they would need from you. With Power Apps, it's a matter of time and a matter of clicks and maybe some tiny bit of coding in the end, where you can actually find this mobile phone or tablet or web-based application that will by simply dragging and dropping blocks of code and items on a canvas, you are able to create this application that would connect Exchange Online for emails with OneDrive or with SharePoint. So every time a student would create such a request through the application, an email notification would be sent out, and the associated storage on SharePoint would be filled in with the data that the student has to bring in, so on and so forth. So you can use Power Apps to basically create any kind of connections and integrations within and sometimes outside of the Microsoft 365 stack, again, to contribute to the process of hybrid learning. Power Automate is pretty much the same to a certain extent. Of course, it will allow you to create flows, operational flows, links between various services and workloads in Office 365 or in Microsoft 365 that would accelerate things or standardize things. And again, the example with a student request, you can generate such an automation form that you don't have to worry about it, and you will circulate that request with the right stakeholders, get it approved, and then automatically send an answer to the student once it's done. Power Virtual Agents is one of the tools that we use for virtual agents. It's kind of a chatbot tool that is easily buildable. It's easy to build, and it's easy to populate with relevant information. So that would further alleviate the workload on people that have to answer all day to the same kind of questions. So you would just spin up a Power Virtual Agent, populate its knowledge base with the questions and answers you already have and you've already been sending frequently, and then you can expose that to your students, and you have a solution to cater for their needs without anyone necessarily assisting the process, but it's all an automated thing. And last but not least, the Power BI, which is an amazing report tool that is able to aggregate data from various reports, from various sources, from Excel, from CSV, from SQL databases on-prem or in cloud or anything else. It's able to aggregate all this data and create very meaningful reports. as to how education is going based on the fact that you are using all those services, and there is a lot of data and a lot of knowledge hidden under this data that currently you don't have access to because you simply are not leveraging those tools to the full extent. Coming back to pure hybrid learning and to the scenarios that is described by that, it's basically the way it looks on the slide right now. You have a teacher with a bunch of resources, a machine, a laptop, a PC, a tablet, and then you have two different types of audiences, one at home and one in school. And the challenge with the teacher is how do you get all those pieces of the puzzle together? How do you get all those people, all those students to engage and feel that they are present in the classroom and engaged just as well as if they were on the classroom floor sitting with their colleagues? So that has posed new challenges and new questions. And to that, I took the liberty of designing this short animation here, which is very 12 to say it, but it does paint the picture where Microsoft Teams rooms, which is the concept Microsoft is bringing forward, is the way we address remote and hybrid learning. Microsoft Teams rooms is this set of dedicated hardware and software resources, and by software we're talking about cloud and Microsoft 365 and all of the stuff you've seen across those 2 days, and combine that with high quality AV, audio video devices that are able to capture the full extent of what's going on in the classroom and then relay that further to the students at home. So if you take a look on this screenshot I have here, you can see that there are a couple of devices lying around. At the back of the classroom, there's a camera that's capturing the whole auditorium, and that's relaying that back home to the students that cannot attend. So they get this feeling of inclusiveness and they have this awareness of what's going on in the classroom. There's a big screen over there, which is probably a Microsoft Surface Hub, which allows the teacher to see from a single glance both the students in class and both the students at home, and is able to quickly interact with both of them as they are one single group. And not to mention also the content cameras that go into it, and the fact that those devices are all equipped or can be equipped with auxiliary high definition audio microphones. So your people that frequently probably attend those kind of online events and online conferences, and you know how tiring it is if the audio quality is not that good, or if it's hushes, or it cracks, or it's cumbersome. So it really makes sense to not only to invest in the software and in solutions that enable the hybrid or remote education, but also invest in the tools that relay this education process forward. Because at the end of the day, it's a communication process. It has to be both ways, rather than just the teacher just talking nonstop for 50 minutes and then take a break and that's it. It has to be this back and forth communication between teachers and students. And of course, you can replicate this setup with a laptop and a webcam and probably a kickstand microphone, but it will never get as high fidelity, as engaging, and as natural as it would get with a dedicated Microsoft Teams room classroom setup. And talking about setups, I'm going to quickly jump through a couple of slides because I want to get to the actual setups, which can come in many different sizes, shapes, and formats, from the most basic ones, like the ones you have here, which is just a PC with a high definition camera on top and a poly, in this case, a polysync speaker on the left-hand side to enable the right audio quality and to enable capturing the right sounds without background noise, so on and so forth. And with a tablet, and this can be a perfect home office setup for an educator that likes to sit like I am right now, and sit in front of his PC and talk to the students. this could do the trick just fine. And again, you can replace this with just a laptop and a webcam, but you would simply not get the same quality and the same level of engagement as you would with a dedicated solution. And still keeping it on setups, here's a more advanced home setup where you're using also a content camera that is able to look at that whiteboard, capture the content, and display it in Teams as it would be a digital whiteboard. So whatever the teacher is writing in the whiteboard on the whiteboard is not a matter of zooming in, trying to adjust the focus of the camera to make sure that every single corner of the whiteboard is being captured and rendered properly. You just don't have to worry about any of that. You can just plug in the content camera and start writing on the whiteboard. And once you do so, it will also recognize that there's a teacher that's writing there. And although it's sitting with the back at the camera knows that it's writing on a whiteboard, so it automatically reduces the opacity of the person so that the students that are watching can actually see both the person that's writing on the whiteboard, the teacher, both the content that the teacher is actually writing on the whiteboard. It's more or less easy to replace those solutions with off-the-shelf standard ones, but you will never get to this degree of high definition of quality, which will then in turn result in struggling with the engagement of your students, struggling to keep up the hours, struggling to maintain the same level of authority as you would if you were an educator sitting in class. There are various ways to think about those setups. This can be a K-12 classroom setup. By K-12, we usually mean primary and secondary education. So you can see, again, the big surface monitor that is connecting the teacher with the students at home. On top on the ceiling, there's a content camera mounted that is watching, it's looking at the whiteboard and relaying the content there in that very nice cropped manner and displaying that as a digital whiteboard in Teams. The speakers that have the right sound quality, the microphones, so on and so forth. And last but not least, this can be extended to large auditorium halls. Is the same basic concept. It's just a matter of choosing the right devices and understanding how to combine those with the technologies we presented over the past 2 days. So more or less, it's about hardware and software, as it has always been the case. This time we're talking about very special hardware, very adapted to the purpose hardware, built with education in mind and not just adapted afterwards. We're talking about the same kind of cloud solutions that are built with education in mind and not just adapted afterwards to serve another purpose, which all allows for this hybrid education process to carry on within the right conditions and the right criterias going further. I think this one is a very relevant one, and I'll wrap up on this slide. While it's not strictly related to hybrid learning per se, it's something that I would like to leave you with at the end. When choosing a device for your students, for your teacher, for your staff, for your leadership teams, really think about what the usage of that device will be and try to adapt your choices to fit the needs of the users that will eventually be using those devices. If we're talking primary school, then the device should be very smart in inking, like we have the inking with Surface, which is very natural, very intuitive, and very efficient for students to be able to use a pen, a digital pen on a display, which feels more or less just as natural as using a pen and paper in a traditional way. So if you're looking for primary devices for students that are learning to handwrite right now, an inking device should be the one that makes sense, and probably not an Intel Core 10 device, high spec with 32 gigs of RAM, because that's going to be useless for them. However, if you're looking into higher education, then also you need to adapt the way you choose your device to fit the specific needs of the users that will be using that device.